Ben Taub is a contributor for The New Yorker and has been covering the war in Syria. So Ben, it's so disturbing to hear and see what is happening there in Syria. We heard Deborah say the Russians, the Syrians are denying any responsibility here. But we hear these reports of civilians being killed just in the last day, weeks, months, years that this has been going on. Do you think that anyone will be held responsible for these killings?
Well, unfortunately, international criminal law is a relatively new and fragile endeavor, and its practice is largely contingent on geopolitics. So in the case of Syria, the International Criminal Court, which was created originally on a drafted treaty in 1998 and then really created in 2003, specifically to look into scenarios exactly like we're seeing in Syria and to investigate these crimes and hold people to account. Syria, the International Criminal Court has no jurisdiction in Syria, and the reason for that is that it never ratified the treaty. It signed it, but it never really ratified it, and so the only way for these crimes to be investigated by the ICC would be for the UN Security Council to vote in favor of that, and Russia blocked a measure that would have done so. But as you say, this has been going on for years. I have here a copy of the Rome Statute, which is the International Criminal Court's governing and founding document, and if we go through it, because Syria is existing in a jurisdictional vacuum, essentially what we're seeing is that this document is being used not as a list of prohibitions for conduct, battlefield conduct, but as a manual for how to carry out the campaign. If I could list some crimes that have been happening for the past 5 years in a widespread, systematic manner, we're talking about crimes against humanity, which include and continue to include in detention centers torture, murder, rape, enforced disappearance, illegal imprisonment, persecution, other inhumane acts. In Aleppo, we're seeing a crime of extermination, which is considered the deprivation of access to food and medicine, calculated to bring about the destruction of a population. And there's 20 other war crimes that I could go through right now, but everyone should find it in this document.
So I think you just answered my question there, but let's talk about like the ceasefire, for instance. The point of it was to get civilians out, right? Why would pro-government forces kill civilians? And we saw in the images there women, children among them, who were just trying to get out of the city.
Well, so in fact, forcible displacement is also a crime against humanity and a war crime. So that could be prosecuted. There's an extraordinary level of documentation on this in this war. There are cases that are ready to go to trial that have been drafted from Syrian government's internal security and intelligence memos. I wrote about a group in April called the Commission for International Justice and Accountability. They smuggled 600,000 documents out of Syria. People died smuggling those documents out of the country. They built a case. It's ready to go to trial. There's no court to hear it. As you say, civilians are, for many weeks, they've been trapped. They've been encircled for months. That's a war crime. And bombarding them as they're trapped in this area is a war crime. Forcibly displacing them now is a war crime. The document is totally unambiguous in its wording. Like, these things are not questions of, well, maybe it should be investigated, like if it's possible that war crimes are occurring. They're occurring.
There's no doubt.
They're all over. But geopolitical obstacles are impeding any route to justice at the moment. And now that Russia is committing war crimes, and it was that blocking vote on the UN Security Council, the only way for jurisdiction to happen would be for Russia to vote against itself, to refer itself to the International Criminal Court, which is just never going to happen.
Speaking of the Security Council, at the UN Security Council on Tuesday, U.S. Ambassador Samantha Power confronted Assad, Russia, and Iran over Aleppo, saying, quote, "It should shame you. Instead, by all appearances, it is emboldening you. You are plotting your next assault," she said. Where might that next assault be? What is she speaking of, potentially?
Well, most likely it would be in Idlib province, which is in the northwest of Syria. That's where civilians are now, according to this deal, supposedly being allowed to go to. So they're going to be trapped because the Turkish border is now closed. Refugees cannot go to Turkey. Now you'll have the same civilians. 3 months from now, we're going to have exactly the same conversation about the exact same crimes, about the exact same tactics. The failure of any accountability is emboldening the perpetration of these crimes. Like, is this how wars are going to be fought now? If the actors have enough geopolitical sway that they won't go to trial, then what is to stop them from doing this? As long as there's no military obstacles, nothing. Just absolutely nothing.
Ben Taub, a crisis unfolding there and continuing to unfold in Syria. More and more civilians killed every day. Ben, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.